Aurelia, who some of you guys call Ray, right? Said that it was the jungle. Does anyone here remember the jungle? Because, wow, okay. Can I just say there was no jungle by the late 70s? I think the jungle was where we're now standing. And it was like a wooded spot with, contemplation and all of that. Anyway, so I'm going to get this mic out of the way so you can see Ray.
When I entered Barnard in 1941, 3 months before the opening of the Second World War, I was a rather shy 17-year-old. It was a particularly difficult time for me because my mother had recently died. For the first year, I commuted from my home in New Rochelle, but for the following 3 years, I was a dorm student in Hewitt. I had no clear idea of what I really wanted to study, but I'd always been interested in science. And on the very first day, I was told you have to choose either botany or zoology. Zoology won, but it's interesting to note that the man I married 16 years later was a horticulturist, and so botany has played a large part in the 57 years we still spend together. When I was a sophomore, my zoo teacher was Dr. Grace Forbes. She was a fairly young, pretty woman, and her classes were really a lot of fun. She suggested to me that I apply for a job as a summer student at a cancer research lab in Bar Harbor, Maine. Jackson Lab at that time, which was situated right near where Acadia National Park is now, had been started by a Dr. Little who was interested in studying cancer and genetics using inbred mice. There were about 8 scientists, and each student was assigned to one of them. We lived in tents in the middle of a forest, and the mouse house was next door. And this is where the mice were kept and where we did our work, and also where we took our showers. Cadillac Mountain, one of the highest points on the Atlantic seacoast, was nearby, and the Army was camped at the summit where they could look for German submarines, which we knew were in the area. One night, returning to my tent, I got lost in the woods. I lost the path. And at that time, we could not use flashlights because there was a blackout because the light might attract enemies who might be flying overhead. I was really terrified. I kept walking and walking, and it seemed suddenly I was going up a mountain. I was afraid it might be Cadillac. And I yelled for a long time, and obviously they finally found me. The next day, they gave me a cowbell. At that time, I did not think it was funny. Back at college in the fall, Dr. Forbes listened to my very excited description of the summer, which was truly a very magical time. And she said, "I think you should go to medical school." I had never even contemplated such a thing. It seemed far out of anything I could imagine, although I had friends who were pre-med. But the idea was very intriguing, and my father fortunately agreed with it. At that time, women in medicine were very unusual. It was generally the idea, mostly of men, that it was a waste of time and money to spend so much of it educating a woman and only have her quit after she graduated. In my senior year, I had a teacher, Florence Lowther, who did not believe this. So she conducted a small survey comparing the number of women versus men in med school who stayed in after graduation, and it was most favorable for women. That was one of the first questions I was asked in my pre-admission interview by the doctors from NYU Medical School. I was admitted in 1945 as one of 27 women in a class of 127. And this huge number of women was absolutely unbelievable at the time, although today we know it's more like 50-50. And I would like to add that of those 127, all the women graduated, but not quite all the men. After graduation, I spent 4 years in hospital training. The first year was in medicine and surgery, which included some neurosurgery, and I was the only woman in the group. The most exciting part of it was a brain surgery that I did. There was a patient who had a subdural hematoma, which is a collection of blood between the brain and the skull. and I was able to do this operation. And he regained consciousness on the table and recovered completely. And I was actually asked if I wanted to continue in neurosurgery, but I declined. And I spent the next 3 years getting my pediatric training. In 1953, I opened an office in New Rochelle for pediatrics, also working at that time in many of the public health clinics in Westchester County and also the metropolitan area of New York. And after, at that time, I also did some school health. A few years later, I took classes in public health at Columbia, and this led to my being appointed acting commissioner of health for the city of New Rochelle. When New Rochelle was finally admitted to the Westchester County Department of Health, I became director of child health and the medical director of their child health protection program. I retired in 1993 after 40 years of practice. I have to mention to you what really happened to Jackson Lab. Jackson Lab in 1947 was destroyed with most of Bar Harbor in a terrible fire. Everything was lost, all the mice were gone. But in some ways, it was like a phoenix arising from the ashes because donations started pouring in. And today, Jackson Lab is one of the most vital medical research institutions and is located at 3 places in the US, in California and Bar Harbor, and also in Farmington, Connecticut, which opened last October. And I was excited to go there for that opening with my son. I would like to say that I feel I was really lucky to be able to have a wonderful family life, raise 3 sons with the help of my husband and my father, and also practice medicine. I have a real debt of gratitude to give to Barnard, to our Dean Gildersleeve, who always urged us girls of Barnard, she called us, and she urged us to train our brains. But especially the 2 teachers, Grace Forbes and Florence Lather, who showed me the light which guided me into medicine. Thank you.